back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys! So I'm here today to review two fantasy books that I think you will definitely enjoy if you like the same sort of reads as me, because I really enjoyed both of these. The first one I have to talk about is Red Sister by Mark Lawrence, and the other one is The Witchwood Crown by Tad Williams. So I'm going to start off with Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. I picked this book up because I'd seen a couple people review it and say it was great, and I do enjoy Mark Lawrence's other books. I have read Prince of Thorns, that whole series by him, and I've started the Red Queen War one, whatever that one is called. I've started that. I've read the first book of that too, so I knew that I already liked his style. My only criticism of previous Mark Lawrence books has been the women and just the lack of them, really. But that all changed with Red Sister, because Red Sister focuses on a nunnery, and at this nunnery we follow lots of different women and lots of different girls who are in training, particularly our main character, who is called Nonna, and a couple of her classmates and friends like Clara, Hesse and Ara, and all of these are in training to become Red Sisters. It was quite an impulse read for me because I don't actually own the book. I have the audiobook which I listened to, and I would definitely recommend the audiobook, and I will hopefully pick myself up a copy now I've read it and really enjoyed it. But I kind of did it a bit spur of the moment. I just downloaded the audiobook because I had a new credit from Audible and I was hoping to get something fun and exciting, and a lot of people recommended it, so I thought, right, I'll give it a try. I'm really glad I did, because I ended up just really enjoying it, and it's definitely my favourite of Mark Lawrence's books so far. So that was great. In this story, like I say, we're following the girls as they go through training to become Red Sisters, and this not only involves sort of learning different magical techniques, but also learning more nefarious techniques as well. It definitely feels like more than just a coming-of-age story, even though we have novices in training to become something more. It feels like a more in-depth story than some of the other coming-of-age ones that I've read, and I really enjoyed the fact that he kind of took on this whole female-dominated story in a really good way and did a great job with it. Nonna is definitely the main character of her group of friends, but as the story goes on we sort of end up following all of them in their different roles and the way that they kind of get involved in the plotline. Each of them has something different to offer. So we have some who are more skilled in diplomacy, some who are more skilled in fighting and magic and different things like that. It was really nice to have a group of people who all had their own thing to offer and bring. What I really like about this book is as it unfolded, we got to see a lot more trust and friendship, betrayal, power, all of those emotions and those plot twists and those moments that really make a story great fun. The plot is something I definitely enjoyed, and although I found a few bits slightly predictable, it was still a great romp through an excellent little world and story, and it didn't take away from my enjoyment the predictable moments, because there were so many moments that I still didn't manage to predict. One of the major sort of magical elements of the world is the blade path that the girls have to go along and try and unlock their magical potential and figure out ways to navigate along the blade path using their magic. And it's described in a way that made it seem totally badass in my head, like such a cool trial and such an interesting, visually stimulating thing that I could really envision it in my mind, and it was great. So I really liked that, and sort of hearing the girls describe it and the way that they had to think and feel in the moments when they were going along the blade path and the way that they had to kind of interact with the magic of this world, it was really well done, and I definitely enjoyed seeing that particular magical element, although there were others that were really cool as well. Overall, it was a really solid book, and I think the plot moves along at a steady pace, the characters really get developed on, and we get moments of just really interesting, great friendship between girls, which I don't think you see that often in fantasy or even in just general like books. It's really nice to see female friendship at the forefront. Of course, we do get betrayal and other things too, but I mean, it wouldn't be a good fantasy story without some of that. So we get a bit of everything, and I really liked seeing that, and I really enjoyed seeing Mark Lawrence kind of tackle this female society, which is definitely interacting with males. They kind of try and get in on the story at different points, but it's mostly dominated by women and kind of the different things that they are in training to understand, to develop, to grow. And Nonna in particular is a great character because she's quite a lonely character at first. It takes her quite a time to open up in the story, and she's got a past as well. So seeing her gradually get into the mix of the characters, seeing her slowly unlock her magical potential, but also the potential of friendships, it was really, really nice. And there were a few moments where I thought a character was one way and then it turned, and it intrigued me and surprised me that they were a different way. So nothing is really black and white. It's kind of more of a grey area, which is definitely what I prefer. It is kind of a grimdark read. I would say there are some moments of pretty nasty torture, so if you're not maybe into grimdark, possibly avoid it. But if you don't mind those sorts of things and you can get past them and you can kind of just block it out, then it worked really, really well for me personally. And I really, really enjoyed it. It was just a super fun read. Definitely a great audiobook too. So I'm definitely going to be picking myself up a copy at some point to put on my shelf, because I would highly recommend this series and I really, really enjoyed it. I'll certainly be following on with more of their adventures because it is the first in a series, I believe. So whenever the next one comes out, I will be picking it up and reading further. And I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars overall. So the other book I have to talk about is The Witchwood Crown by Tad Williams, which you can see is a beast of a book. It is huge. This book very recently came out and I was super excited to get a copy because I was kind of in the middle of reading the Austenard books anyway, which are down here, these colourful ones, and I wanted to get onto this one, but I decided I was going to read the rest of the Austenard books first because this is set in the same world as the Austenard Memory of Sorrow and Thorn series, but it is set 30 years after those initial books. I will just say now that there is a slight spoiler when I talk about what this book is about for the first series, so if you don't want to hear that, then you should click out now. It is only minor, but I mean it tells you what characters are alive still at the end of those books, so if you don't want to hear that, then maybe click off now. But this book follows 2 characters who are in the first series called Simon and Miriam Mell, and at this point in the story, 30 years after the ending, they are the king and queen of Austenard, ruling side by side over a kingdom that has been pretty peaceful for the majority of those 30 years. They had some really, really terrible troubles in the first 4 books, or 3 books, however you want to call it, because the 3rd book got split into 2, and they were basically fighting for their lives at different points against the Norns, who are a fairly evil kind of elven race. But 30 years later, once they've achieved the crown, they've managed to keep the kingdom pretty whole and pretty steady over those years. At the point where we join the story, we're starting to see a few things that are slight triggers that maybe this evil that used to be in the world is coming back. Maybe it's growing again. Maybe something is letting it start coming back in some evil ways. And one of the things that we discover is that people have been hunting the Scythi, who are a kind of magical race. We have a Scythi character who's coming to try and negotiate with them, who is shot by an arrow. We have the Norns themselves as characters in this book, which is something we never really got much of in book 1 or in the first trilogy. So it's really, really cool to see the Norns become characters in their own right, and I loved that about this book. I thought it made it way more dynamic and interesting. But for me, the biggest plus about this book is the massive increase in writing ability. Tad Williams wrote the first books, I think, in like the 80s and 90s. This is obviously a brand new book, so he's had a fair amount of time to perfect his trade and his craft, and he definitely has done that over the years. He has come back stronger than ever with a book that's about as chunky, if not chunkier, than the ones he wrote before, but a lot more fast-paced, a lot more action-packed. There are so many subplots and storylines that weave really nicely together. We follow not only Simon and Miriam Mell, but also, as I say, the Norn characters, the Scythi characters. We follow some of the associates who are friends of Miriam Mell and Simon, who were seen in the first few books, and also who have survived the 30 years. We see some of their grandchildren and their children who are involved as characters, and they kind of have their own troubles and their own things to deal with. In growing up in a world that has been peaceful, they haven't really been exposed to the same horrors and dangers that Miriam Mell and Simon were, and so they're maybe not as able as Simon and Miriam Mell were, and this is something that causes a lot of strife between Simon and his grandson in particular, and it causes kind of worry for his grandmother, who is Miriam L. What I liked about this was the family dynamics and the dynamics of the women in this book was so much improved on the first series. My major criticism with most of the books in the first series was that the women and the girls in that story were just not utilised anywhere near to their potential, and I wish they would just be utilised better, and in this book he does that. Tad Williams has obviously just decided to go for it and write really great female characters in this, and it works super duper well. It just comes across as excellent fun for all of the characters, not just the men, and I really, really like that about this. Of course, we don't just have great female characters, we have some who are evil, some who are nasty, and the same with the men. There is also the trolls. The trolls are my favourite characters from the first series, so we see a lot more of them in this series, and that makes me really, really happy that we see a lot more of them, because they were my faves, and they're still my faves, and I really, really enjoyed getting to see more of their plotline as the book went on. Overall, this ended on a huge cliffhanger, which made me think that everything I knew about the characters was maybe not actually what I knew about the characters, and I don't know who is really good and who is really bad now. I'm really intrigued about what the next book is going to do and who is going to be fighting for who and what they're going to do. I can't say much more without spoiling it, but I really, really want book 2 now because I've really, really enjoyed it, and I definitely found the ending exciting and mind-blowing and just like, what? So, yeah. The next book I imagine will come out in a year or two. I don't know when. It's a way off, but I would still highly recommend you guys pick up this one and possibly the previous series if you would like to read that first, because it is a really, really great classic fantasy style series, and I definitely enjoyed this first one in the new series. So I gave this a 4.5 overall, and it's definitely one of my favourites in the fantasy Tad Williams realm. Otherland is still one of my favourite series by Tad Williams. So that is my review for Red Sister and the Witchwood Crown. Let me know which one appeals to you most in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you very soon in my next video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.